The reverse invasion. The war chamber of the Zyntharian High Council gleamed with bioluminescent panels, each surface pulsing in rhythmic coordination with the neural patterns of its occupants. Commander Vex'thor stood before the assembled officers, his 3 sensory stalks rigid with military precision. The conquest of Earth shall commence at dawn cycle 7942, he announced, projecting a holographic image of the blue-green planet spinning before them. Intelligence confirms the inhabitants are primitive, minimal technological advancement, no unified planetary defense system. Around the circular table, the council members communicated through controlled pheromone releases, the mark of a truly civilized species. Emotional outbursts were biological impossibilities for Zyntharians. Logic governed everything. "What of their weaponry?" inquired Science Officer Krell, her translucent membrane flickering with analytical patterns. "Chemical propulsion rockets, crude explosives. Their most advanced artificial intelligence cannot even achieve consciousness level 3. Vex'thor dismissed the concern with a wave of his primary appendage. "We've conquered 47 worlds. This will be the 48th. The vote was unanimous, efficient, emotionless, exactly as decisions should be made. The invasion fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere 3 weeks later, their ships' cloaking fields shimmering like heat waves above the Nevada desert. Vex'thor had chosen this location specifically, far from major population centers, allowing for a strategic foothold before the main assault. But something went wrong immediately. The humans didn't run. Instead, they approached, on foot, in primitive wheeled vehicles, some carrying objects. Vex'thor's threat analysis sensors went haywire, trying to classify the items. Wooden sticks with fabric attached, flat rectangles emitting light, small handheld devices pointed directly at the ships. "Sir, they're advancing," reported Lieutenant Zix, his voice modulator crackling with confusion. "Should we engage defensive protocols?" "Wait." Vex'thor studied the approaching crowd through the observation portal. The humans were making sounds, loud, repetitive vocalizations, their facial muscles contorted into disturbing configurations. Are they showing their teeth? In Zyntharian biology, baring teeth meant only one thing: aggression, predatory intent. Yet these humans showed their teeth while making high-pitched sounds and moving their bodies in jerky, uncoordinated motions. "They're armed with communication devices," Krell observed, her analytical organs processing the data. "They're documenting our forces for military intelligence." "Tactical maneuver," Vex'thor concluded. "They're documenting our forces for military intelligence. Deploy the universal translator." The first human words came through garbled, then clear. "Can't believe it. They're really here. Oh my God, aliens!" The word God triggered alerts across every Zyntharian database. Religious warfare, fanaticism, the most unpredictable combat variable. "Is God their military commander?" Zix asked. Unknown. Proceed with caution. First Contact Protocol demanded a show of superior technology. Vex'thor activated the ship's external speakers, his translated voice booming across the desert. Humans of Earth, we are the Zyntharian Imperium. You will... A small human broke from the crowd. Young, barely developed. It ran directly toward the ship. Intruder alert. Multiple weapon systems armed automatically. But the small human stopped just beyond the shield perimeter, its face contorting into that disturbing teeth display. It held up a small object, rectangular, wrapped in colorful material. Here, it's a candy bar. Welcome to Earth. Vex'thor's threat analysis imploded. A candy bar. According to the database, this was food? The juvenile human was offering sustenance to a superior military force. Commander, this violates every conquest scenario we've encountered, Krell said, her analytical pheromones thick in the ship's air. Conquered species either flee or fight. They don't offer snacks.
More humans approached now, emboldened. They carried various items, flowers, food, more of those light-emitting rectangles. One human held a small, four-legged creature covered in fur. The creature made loud sounds and pulled against a restraint, its mouth open, tongue visible. Biological weapon! 3 soldiers simultaneously reached for their particle disruptors. Wait, Vex'thor commanded, but uncertainty crept through his neural pathways, an unfamiliar sensation. Scan the creature. It's domesticated, sir, a companion animal. Species Canis familiaris. The humans keep them in their dwelling spaces. They cohabitate with predatory beasts? Vex'thor felt his central processor struggling with the data. Why? The human holding the creature moved closer, that teeth display fixed on its face. This is Max. Wanna pet him? He's friendly. The word friendly translated clearly, but the context made no sense. The creature, Max, continued its aggressive vocalizations, yet the human showed no fear. In fact, the human appeared to be enjoying the creature's behavior. Sir, I recommend immediate withdrawal, Zix urged. These beings are psychologically unstable. Before Vex'thor could respond, liquid began streaming from the young human's eyes. The child's face contorted, sounds of distress emanating from its mouth. The juvenile is leaking! Krell's alarm pheromones flooded the bridge. Possible acidic defense mechanism. But an adult human rushed over, gathering the child in its appendages, no, arms, and making soothing sounds. The child's leaking slowed. The adult human looked toward the ship and performed an elaborate gesture with its shoulders. Translation? Vex'thor demanded. A shrug, sir. It indicates, the computer paused, processing, casual dismissal of concern, apology, or sometimes sarcasm. The gesture has 17 possible meanings depending on context. 17! Vex'thor felt his command protocols fracturing. How does a species communicate effectively with such ambiguity? More humans arrived, hundreds now, then thousands. They established a perimeter around the ships, but not a military one. They set up structures, colorful fabric stretched between poles, small fires for cooking, musical instruments. Commander, they're camping, Krell reported, disbelief saturating her voice. They've turned our invasion site into a recreational gathering. Vex'thor watched through the observation portal as humans arranged themselves in circular groups, consuming food and producing those terrible teeth displays. Some paired off, pressing their mouths together, a behavior the database identified as kissing, a ritualistic exchange of bacteria colonies. They're deliberately weakening their immune systems, Zix observed. This species is suicidal. But they didn't look suicidal. They looked happy. The database provided the word, but Vex'thor had no corresponding emotional framework. Zyntharians had evolved beyond such inefficient neural states. A delegation of humans approached, led by an individual wearing formal coverings. The translator identified it as a government official. "Welcome to Earth," the official said, teeth fully displayed. "I'm here representing the United Nations. We'd like to invite you to address the General Assembly." "An ambush," Vex'thor concluded. "They want us to enter a confined space where they can deploy chemical or biological agents." "Actually," the official continued, "we're just excited to meet you. We have so many questions. Where are you from? How does faster-than-light travel work? Have you visited other planets? Oh, and we're planning a welcome dinner. Do you eat food, or is that a weird question?" The barrage of queries hit Vex'thor like plasma fire. The official's facial expression changed rapidly. Curiosity, excitement, nervousness, hope, all cycling in seconds. How did humans function with such emotional turbulence? "We required time to consider your proposal," Vex'thor managed. "Of course, take all the time you need. We'll be here." The official walked away, then turned back. "Oh, if you need anything, water, food, Wi-Fi, just let us know." Wi-Fi, the database identified as their information network. They were offering the invading force access to their communication infrastructure.
"This is psychological warfare of the highest caliber," Vex'thor told his crew. "They're trying to confuse us, make us lower our defenses. We must remain vigilant." Over the following days, the situation deteriorated further. The humans refused to behave like any conquered species in Zyntharian history. They didn't organize military resistance. They didn't flee. Instead, they threw a festival. Massive speakers appeared, blasting what the database called music, organized sound waves that made absolutely no tactical sense. Humans moved their bodies in chaotic patterns called dancing. Some consumed ethanol-based liquids that deliberately impaired their cognitive functions. "They're poisoning themselves," Zix exclaimed during one observation session, "for entertainment." Worse still, they invited the Zyntharians to join. "Come on down," a human shouted through a megaphone. "We don't bite. Well, some of us do, but only consensually." The translator struggled with that last phrase, eventually marking it as contextual humor, sexual overtones possible, threat level unclear. Vex'thor convened an emergency council meeting inside the flagship. "Assessment, everyone. Why haven't they attacked? Perhaps they're studying us, learning our weaknesses before striking. Or maybe," Lieutenant Zix ventured carefully, "they're not planning to attack at all." The silence that followed was profound. "Impossible," Vex'thor stated. "Every species responds to invasion with either submission or resistance. These are universal constants. Except humans appear to be responding with hospitality, which could be the most insidious strategy of all. Lure us into complacency, then strike when our defenses are down. We must study them more carefully. I'm authorizing reconnaissance missions into human population centers." The first team ventured into the nearby town of Rachel, Nevada,
Population 54. The humans seem to regard the Zyntharians as celebrities. "Can I take a selfie with you?" a young human approached with that ubiquitous light rectangle device. "A selfie," the scout team leader, Officer Trix, consulted the database. "A self-portrait photograph, often shared on social networks for peer validation." "Yeah, it'll get so many likes." The human positioned itself next to Trix, angled the device, made a teeth display, and pressed a button. "Thanks! You're going on Instagram." Within minutes, the image had been replicated and transmitted to thousands of other humans, who responded with small graphical symbols, hearts, thumbs-up gestures, crying, laughing faces. "Sir," Trix reported back, "they're spreading our likeness across their global network, but not as enemy combatants, as content." "Explain content," Vex'thor demanded. "Entertainment, sir. They find us amusing." The concept of being found amusing by a species they intended to conquer was so alien that Vex'thor's neural processor briefly locked up.
The reconnaissance continued. The team was invited into human dwellings, offered food and drink, asked endless questions. One human, an elementary school teacher, invited them to speak to her class. "They're juveniles in combat training?" Trix asked nervously. "No, sir. Educational development, learning mathematics, language, social skills." Against better judgment, Trix accepted. What followed was perhaps the most disturbing encounter yet. 30 small humans sat in rows, their eyes wide with excitement. They raised their appendages rapidly, making loud noises. Pick me! I have a question!" The teacher made a calming gesture. "One at a time, children. Remember we talked about taking turns?" Taking turns. The database indicated this was a cooperation protocol. But why would a species teach cooperation to their young? Wouldn't competitive aggression produce superior warriors? "Do you eat food?" one juvenile asked. "Are you boys or girls or something else?" another inquired. "Can you do magic? Do you have pets? What's your favorite color?" The questions came rapid fire, each more baffling than the last. Trix attempted to answer diplomatically, but the juveniles seemed disappointed that Zyntharians didn't eat pizza, couldn't turn invisible, and didn't understand the cultural significance of dinosaurs. Then one small human approached with a drawing, colorful marks on paper depicting a Zyntharian holding hands with a human child, both displaying those disturbing teeth configurations. "I made this for you, so you remember that we're friends." Friends. The database provided the definition: a person with whom one has a bond of mutual affection. Trix took the drawing with trembling appendages and retreated to the ship where Vex'thor was waiting. "Report," the commander demanded. "Sir, I don't know what to report. They're not soldiers, they're not preparing for war, they're just living." Vex'thor decided to investigate human media next. Surely their entertainment would reveal their true violent nature. The crew gathered to watch something called movies. The first selection was classified as horror, designed to induce fear, perfect for understanding human combat psychology. But what they saw defied all logic. Humans paid currency to watch recordings of other humans being chased, terrorized, and sometimes killed by various threats: supernatural entities, aliens, psychopaths. And then, impossibly, after watching these scenarios, the humans would smile, laugh, discuss the experience positively. They enjoy fear? Krell's confusion pheromones were so intense, the air filtration system kicked into overdrive. They deliberately exposed themselves to simulated danger for pleasure?
Maybe it's desensitization training, preparing themselves for actual combat, Zyke suggested. But the database indicated humans watched horror movies for fun. They even had a genre called comedy horror, where frightening scenarios were paired with humor. The concept broke something fundamental in Vex'thor's worldview.
They tried other genres. Action movies showed humans performing impossible physical feats, destroying property, engaging in combat, and these were the heroes. Romantic comedies depicted humans engaging in bizarre courtship rituals involving deception, misunderstanding, and eventual mouth-pressing. Science fiction showed humans encountering aliens, and the plots ranged from friendship to warfare to something called interspecies romance. They've imagined scenarios with our kind? Vex'thor was horrified. Some of these depict humans forming emotional bonds with extraterrestrial species. Some depict humans going to war with aliens, Zix pointed out. Yes, but in many narratives, humans and aliens ultimately cooperate, find common ground, form alliances against greater threats. Vex'thor paused. This is dangerously optimistic thinking. The crew moved on to music. This proved even more disturbing. Humans had created thousands of genres, each with distinct sonic patterns and cultural meanings. Some music was slow and sad, designed to induce melancholy, an emotion Zyntharians considered a mental illness. Other music was fast and aggressive, causing humans to thrash their bodies violently. "It's a war dance," a crew member exclaimed during a particularly intense rock concert recording. But the database corrected. Moshing, a form of recreational physical contact practiced in certain music subcultures. Participants engage in controlled chaos for enjoyment. Controlled chaos for enjoyment? The contradictions were mounting too rapidly to process. On day 7, disaster struck. A group of humans approached with an invitation to a party. "You guys have been in that ship for a week," Chad said. "You need to get out, mingle, have some fun." Fun, Vex'thor tested the word. The database defines this as enjoyment or playful activity. We do not engage in playful activity. We are a military force. "Dude," Chad said, employing a term the translator struggled with. "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Come on, we've got barbecue, beer, and karaoke." None of those terms translated into anything resembling military intelligence. Against his better judgment, Vex'thor authorized a small contingent to attend, all equipped with recording devices and defensive shields. What followed was pure chaos. The party involved humans consuming cooked animal flesh, which they seemed to enjoy despite its primitive preparation. Drinking various liquids, some alcoholic, some carbonated, all strange, and taking turns vocalizing into amplification devices, the karaoke. Humans would select a song, stand before a crowd of their peers, and attempt to replicate the melody and lyrics. Often they did this poorly. And when they did it poorly, the other humans cheered louder. They're celebrating failure? Officer Trix was baffled. The worse someone performs, the more positive reinforcement they receive? Maybe it's a dominance display, Zix theorized. The individual who can endure the most humiliation proves their status. But that didn't explain why everyone was laughing, including the performer. The human who had just murdered a song called "Don't Stop Believing" was now accepting congratulatory physical contact. Hugs, hand-slapping rituals, shoulder punches, all while displaying maximum teeth. Then Chad approached the Zyntharian contingent. "Your turn." "Absolutely not,"
Vex'thor communicated through the remote link. Do not engage in their ritual humiliation practices. But Trix was already being pulled toward the stage by 3 enthusiastic humans. The music began, a song called I Will Survive. Trix's vocal apparatus, designed for efficient pheromone-augmented communication, proved woefully inadequate for human melodic patterns. The sounds Trix produced were objectively terrible. The humans loved it. They cheered, they danced, they recorded the performance on their devices and immediately shared it across social networks where it received thousands of likes within minutes. "Commander," Trix reported afterward, confused but somehow not traumatized, "I think they genuinely enjoyed that, not as mockery, as shared experience." The situation escalated when humans invited the Zyntharians to a sports event, a football game. Athletic competition, the database confirmed. 2 teams engage in structured physical conflict over territorial control of an inflated spheroid. So war training, finally, something we understand.
They attended the game at a local high school. The stands were filled with humans wearing colored fabrics to indicate tribal affiliation. They shouted coordinated vocalizations, performed synchronized movements, and displayed intense emotional investment in the outcome. Yes, Vex'thor observed, this is what we expected. Tribal warfare, competitiveness, strategic thinking. Then halftime arrived, and everything fell apart again. The marching band took the field. Humans carrying instruments, moving in precise geometric patterns while producing music. But this was different from military precision. There was artistry to it, creativity. One section performed a particularly complex maneuver, and the crowd erupted in appreciation. They're celebrating aesthetic formation patterns? Krell was lost. Not tactical advantage, but beauty. The game resumed, and things only got stranger. When players collided violently, the crowd would exclaim in shock, but then the players would help each other up, exchange words, and continue playing. At the game's end, both teams gathered in a line and performed a ritualistic hand-slapping ceremony with their opponents. They fought for an hour, establishing dominance, and now they're congratulating each other? Zix's confusion pheromones were visible to the naked eye. What was the point of the conflict if they end as equals? It's called sportsmanship, a nearby human explained, having overheard. It's about respect. Yeah, we compete, but at the end of the day, we're all just people playing a game. Just people playing a game. As if territorial competition wasn't a matter of survival, but merely entertainment. The Zyntharians retreated to their ship, deeply disturbed. On day 12, Vex'thor made a fateful decision: to infiltrate human digital networks. "We must understand their communication patterns," he declared. "Access their military databases, strategic planning documents, classified files." What they found instead was the Internet. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. Trillions of data points, updated every second. But as Krell dove deeper into the analysis, her confusion only grew. "Sir, the humans spend approximately 6.5 hours per day on these networks. Military coordination? Intelligence gathering? No, sir. They're images of food they're about to consume, videos of small animals doing amusing things, opinions on entertainment media, arguments about trivial matters, and something called memes, rapidly replicating idea units with humorous intent." Vex'thor pulled up examples. Cats playing keyboards, dogs making sounds that resembled human speech,
humans falling down in various contexts, accompanied by laugh tracks, images with text overlays making jokes about relatable situations. This is what they do with instant global communication? Vex'thor felt his world collapsing. They've created a network spanning their entire planet, and they use it for jokes and arguments, sir. Extensive arguments about everything. They debate politics, ethics, the correct way to prepare a burrito, whether water is wet, which superhero would win in a fight. Superhero? Fictional characters with impossible abilities. The humans create elaborate scenarios where these non-existent entities engage in combat, then argue about the hypothetical outcomes. They debate battles that will never happen between individuals who don't exist? Passionately, sir.
The social networks proved even more bewildering. Humans curated digital representations of their lives, sharing selectively positive moments, meals, vacations, achievements, while simultaneously being aware that everyone else was doing the same thing, creating a collective illusion of perpetual happiness that everyone knew was false, but participated in anyway. It's a mass delusion they're all consciously aware of, Krell summarized, yet they continue the behavior. Because it's fun? Zix suggested weakly. That word again, fun. It was becoming the explanation for everything inexplicable about human behavior. Then they discovered Twitter, now called X, and Vex'thor experienced what the database called an existential crisis. Humans were broadcasting their thoughts in real time, limited to short character counts, engaging in rapid-fire exchanges of ideas, insults, jokes, and observations. The sheer volume of human consciousness on display was staggering, and much of it was directed at each other. They spend more time criticizing their own species than preparing to defend against external threats, Vex'thor observed. They are fractured into thousands of ideological subgroups, each convinced the others are misguided. Shall we exploit these divisions, sir? Zix asked. Classic conquest strategy. Turn them against each other. But Vex'thor was studying something else. Despite all the arguments, the disagreements, the tribal affiliations, when actual crises occurred, natural disasters, accidents, tragedies, the humans would suddenly unite. Money would be raised, volunteers would appear, support would flood in from around the globe. They argue constantly, about everything, but when it matters, Vex'thor trailed off. They help each other. It makes no strategic sense, Krell agreed. On day 17, a human teenager approached the ship and asked if the Zyntharians wanted to see TikTok videos. What followed was perhaps the most psychologically damaging reconnaissance mission in Zyntharian military history. Short videos, 15 to 60 seconds each, depicting humans engaging in coordinated dances, lip-syncing to music, performing comedy sketches, offering life advice, sharing talents, making jokes, and occasionally just existing photogenically. This is what their young spend time creating? Vex'thor watched in horror as millions of videos scrolled past. Not weapons training, not survival skills, not even practical knowledge, just performance? They're seeking validation through peer approval metrics, Krell analyzed. Likes, shares, followers. They've gamified social interaction. One video showed a human failing spectacularly at a physical task, trying to jump over a fence, catching their pants, and falling face first into mud. The video had 47 million views and 8.3 million likes. They broadcast their failures? Zix couldn't comprehend it. Voluntarily? And others celebrate it, find it endearing, relatable. Krell shook her head equivalent. Commander, I'm beginning to think these beings are fundamentally incompatible with our understanding of civilization. Vex'thor couldn't agree. The humans had created a global platform for instant communication and used it to share brief moments of humor, creativity, and connection.
There was no grand strategy, no central purpose, just billions of humans making content for other humans, seeking tiny dopamine hits from strangers' approval. "It's beautiful," one crew member whispered, and then immediately looked shocked at having verbalized such an illogical thought. But in a horrifying way, it was. The humans had created something the Zyntharians never had, a chaotic, unorganized, democratic explosion of individual expression. It was inefficient, often stupid, occasionally profound, and utterly human. The breaking point came during a visit to a human wedding. The Zyntharians had been invited by a couple named Sarah and James, who thought having aliens at their wedding would be totally epic. Vex'thor attended personally, determined to understand this ritual.
The ceremony was held outdoors. Humans sat in rows, wearing formal coverings. Music played, not military anthems, but something soft and emotional. Sarah appeared in a white dress, walked slowly toward James, while humans turned to watch, many with liquid leaking from their eyes. "Biological attack?" a security officer whispered. "No," Vex'thor replied, consulting the database with growing dread. "They're crying, an emotional response. They're happy. Happy enough to leak." The contradiction nearly shut down his logic centers. James and Sarah spoke ritualized words, making promises to each other about the future. Then they pressed their mouths together while the assembled humans made loud, approving sounds. But what truly broke Vex'thor came during the reception. Humans danced, not war dances, not threat displays, but expressions of joy. Elderly humans moved slowly together, having repeated this ritual for decades. Young humans moved energetically, burning calories for no survival purpose. Children ran between the dancers, laughing that particular human laugh that somehow managed to sound like pure happiness crystallized into sound. Sarah's father gave a speech about watching his daughter grow up, about being proud of the woman she'd become, about welcoming James into their family. His voice cracked with emotion. Several humans openly cried. "They're celebrating a social bond formation," Krell observed, "essentially a contract for reproductive partnership." "It's more than that," Vex'thor said quietly. "Look at their faces." The humans were experiencing something Zyntharians had evolved past: overwhelming emotion, love for family, joy for friends, hope for the future. And they were all experiencing it together, united in their happiness for two individuals. An elderly human approached Vex'thor, Sarah's grandmother, 87 years old, smiling despite her advanced age. She said, "You're missing the dancing, dear. Come on, I'll teach you." I don't dance," Vex'thor managed. "Everyone can dance, honey. It's not about being good at it. It's about being part of the moment." She gently took his appendage and led him toward the dance floor. Vex'thor, commander of the Zyntharian invasion fleet, found himself swaying awkwardly to music, while a human grandmother smiled up at him, completely unafraid, completely accepting, treating him not as an alien invader, but just another guest at her granddaughter's wedding. "See," she said, "you're doing great." Something in Vex'thor's consciousness fractured, not broke, but fractured, like light through a prism, revealing colors he'd never known existed. These beings, these impossible, contradictory, emotional, chaotic humans, they weren't primitive. They were something Zyntharians had never encountered: happy. The emergency council meeting convened at midnight. "We need to abort the invasion," Vex'thor announced without preamble. The chamber exploded with confused pheromones. "Sir, we haven't encountered any resistance," Zix protested. "We could take this planet with minimal casualties." "That's exactly the problem." Vex'thor's voice modulator crackled with unprecedented intensity.
Don't you see? They're not resisting, because they don't perceive us as a threat. And that terrifies me more than any weapon ever could. Krell's analytical organs pulsed rapidly. Commander, please clarify. Vex'thor activated the holographic display, flooding the chamber with images collected over the past 3 weeks. Humans laughing, crying, dancing, arguing, creating, destroying, helping, hurting, loving, hating, all of it, the entire spectrum of their contradictory existence. We've conquered 47 worlds. Every single one followed predictable patterns. They either fought with military force, or they surrendered through diplomatic channels, or they fled. But humans, they invited us to parties. They offered us food. They asked us questions. They made us dance. Psychological warfare, an officer suggested. Sophisticated manipulation. No. Vex'thor's certainty was absolute. I've analyzed every interaction, every data point, every recorded conversation. They're not manipulating us. They're just being themselves. And that's what makes them so dangerous.
He pulled up footage from the wedding, zooming in on the faces of the humans as they watched Sarah and James exchange vows. Look at their expressions. Those are genuine emotions. They feel deeply, constantly about everything. They cry at weddings. They laugh at their own failures. They argue passionately about trivial matters and then forgive each other. They create art for no practical purpose. They help strangers they'll never meet again. They love creatures that serve no tactical function. They willingly make themselves vulnerable for the sake of connection. The chamber was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Every species we've conquered operated on logic, self-preservation, and resource optimization. We understand those motivations. We can predict them, exploit them, overcome them. But humans? Vex'thor's stalks drooped with exhaustion. They operate on something we don't have, something we evolved past millions of years ago. Emotion, Krell whispered. Not just emotion, joy. Humans have weaponized joy. They've built an entire civilization on the foundation of seeking happiness, creating beauty, forming connections, and finding meaning in meaningless things. And they do it knowing they're going to die, knowing the universe is indifferent, knowing that objectively nothing they do matters in the cosmic scale. And they do it anyway. Vex'thor turned to face his crew directly. We came here to conquer primitives, but these beings have something we lost when we became civilized. They have life, real, messy, illogical, beautiful life. And if we try to conquer them, one of two things will happen. Either we'll succeed and destroy the very thing that makes them remarkable, or, Zix prompted nervously, or they'll infect us with their humanity. The implications hung in the air like a chemical weapon. I've already felt it, Vex'thor admitted. When that grandmother took my hand and taught me to dance, I felt something, an impulse that wasn't logical, wasn't strategic, wasn't productive. I felt pleased. I enjoyed swaying to rhythmic sounds with a being I'd just met for no reason other than she invited me to. Several officers released alarm pheromones. It's already happening, Krell said, scanning her crew. Trix has been drawing pictures, crude representations of objects she finds aesthetically pleasing. Lieutenant Zix requested access to human music databases. I've caught myself smiling, not as a threat display, as an expression of contentment. They're changing us, an officer said, horror in his modulated voice. Without weapons, without force, without even trying, just by being themselves. Vex'thor nodded slowly. Imagine what would happen if we stayed, if we established occupation protocols. Our soldiers would be exposed to human culture constantly. They'd be invited to birthday parties. They'd be offered coffee at local shops. Children would ask them to visit schools. Humans would share their music, their films, their literature, their food, their lives. Total cultural contamination, Krell concluded. Within a generation, Zyntharian occupying forces would be humanized. And it gets worse, because humans aren't unified. They're fractured into thousands of cultures, each with distinct traditions, beliefs, and practices. They argue constantly about the correct way to exist. They've fought wars over ideological differences. They can't agree on anything. And yet, he pulled up footage from recent natural disasters, humans from different nations, religions, and backgrounds working together, helping strangers, risking their own safety for others. When it matters, they unite, not perfectly, not efficiently, but genuinely. They're capable of both immense cruelty and profound kindness, often in the same individual. They're walking contradictions, and they're comfortable with that. They've even got a word for it: nuance. How do we fight nuance? Zix asked helplessly. We don't. That's my point. Every tactical simulation I've run ends the same way. If we invade with force, we either annihilate them completely, destroying their culture, their diversity, their humanity, or we try to occupy and integrate them, which results in our own culture being diluted by theirs. There's no scenario where we conquer Earth and remain Zyntharian. He pulled up one final image, the drawing the child had made, showing a Zyntharian and human holding hands. This child gave me this image to ensure I'd remember our friendship. We weren't friends. We'd just met. I was part of an invasion force planning to subjugate her entire species, and she drew us as friends because in her worldview that was a possibility. She saw me not as a threat, not as an enemy, but as a potential friend. That's naive, an officer objected. Is it? Or is it the most sophisticated psychological defense mechanism in the galaxy? They neutralize threats by refusing to see them as threats. They turn enemies into friends by treating them as friends before they've earned it. It's illogical, irrational, and it works. Vex'thor deactivated the hologram and faced his crew with resignation.
I'm recommending immediate evacuation and planetary quarantine. Earth must be classified as a level 10 mimetic hazard. Any Zyntharian exposed to human culture for more than 2 weeks shows signs of emotional contamination. It's infectious, and we have no immunity. The High Council will demand justification, Krell noted. Tell them the truth. We encountered a species that defeats invaders not through military might, but through radical acceptance. They're too dangerous to conquer because they make you not want to conquer them. They make you want to join them. The Zyntharian fleet departed Earth 3 days later, leaving behind only a warning beacon. Danger, unpredictable species, psychological contamination risk, approach with extreme caution. In the final transmission to the High Council, Vex'thor included his full report, concluding with a statement that would be debated in Zyntharian academic circles for generations. We came to Earth believing we were superior because we had evolved beyond emotion, beyond inefficiency, beyond illogical behavior. We believed our cold logic made us strong. But humans showed us something we'd forgotten. There's a reason evolution preserved emotions across millions of species on thousands of worlds.
Emotions aren't inefficient. They're what makes survival worth achieving. Humans cry at weddings. They laugh at their mistakes. They create art that serves no function except beauty. They help strangers for no reward. They love imperfectly and forgive repeatedly. They live knowing they'll die and choose to make their brief time mean something anyway. We can't conquer that. We shouldn't conquer that. Because once you've seen a species that chooses joy in a meaningless universe, cold efficiency starts to feel like cowardice. Earth is hereby designated Sector 7G, Restricted Zone Alpha. All Zyntharian vessels are prohibited from approach. Let the humans develop on their own, in their own chaotic, beautiful way. Perhaps one day, when we've learned to feel again, we can return, not as conquerors, but as friends. Until then, keep your distance, because humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They make you want to be like them. Back on Earth, the humans watched the alien ships disappear into the night sky. "Why'd they leave?" Sarah asked James at a viewing party they'd organized, surrounded by friends, family, and several people they'd met just that week at the alien landing site. "Maybe we scared them off," James joked, pulling her close. "Us? Scary?" Chad laughed, taking a swig of beer. "Dude, we literally invited them to a barbecue." "Maybe that's what scared them," Sarah's grandmother suggested with a knowing smile. "Sometimes kindness is the most frightening thing you can offer someone who only understands conflict." A child tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Will they come back?" The mother looked up at the stars, where the alien ships had vanished among countless points of light. "Maybe someday, sweetie, when they're ready." "I hope they do. I want to show them my dinosaur collection." The gathering continued late into the night. Humans talking, laughing, debating whether the aliens had been scared off by the karaoke or the football game, making plans to create a museum dedicated to that time aliens visited and then left, arguing about what should be included, agreeing to disagree, and ultimately deciding to get pizza. Somewhere in the crowd, someone started playing music. Couples danced. Children chased each other. The elderly shared stories. Strangers became friends. Just another Friday night on Earth. Just humans being human. And across the galaxy, in the sterile command chambers of the Zyntharian flagship, Commander Vex'thor found himself doing something he'd never done before. He smiled. It wasn't a threat display. It wasn't a communication protocol. It was genuine. And it terrified him. But in a good way, if good even meant anything anymore in a universe where he'd learned that primitives might be more advanced than the civilizations that conquered them, where weakness could be strength, where the most dangerous weapon was an invitation to dance. Vex'thor opened a personal log, one not transmitted to High Command, and made a single entry. Note to self: learn more about this pizza they kept mentioning, and possibly reconsider the evolutionary benefits of joy. Further research required. Also, what are dinosaurs, and why was the child so excited about them? Must investigate. He closed the log, checked the ship's trajectory away from Earth, and whispered to himself in the empty chamber, "Maybe we'll come back, when we're ready to be friends instead of conquerors. When we can handle the terrifying possibility that life might actually be meant to be enjoyed. Until then, goodbye, humans. Thank you for showing us what we lost, and for not holding it against us when we came as enemies. You really are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, because you made me want to hope for something better." And with that, the Zyntharian fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a planet full of humans who never quite realized they'd just won a war by refusing to fight it. Somewhere in Nevada, a little girl looked at her drawing of a human and an alien holding hands, smiled, and carefully pinned it to her bedroom wall. I knew we could be friends, she said to herself, then went to play with her dog, completely unaware that she'd just saved the world by offering a candy bar and believing in friendship. Because that's what humans do. They hope, even when it makes no sense. Especially when it makes no sense. And somehow, against all logic, that hope changes everything.
The end. 3 years later. The Zyntharian Council received an unexpected transmission from Sector 7G. It was a video message, broadcast on multiple frequencies, ensuring it couldn't be missed. A human appeared on screen, the one called Chad, now slightly older, still grinning that characteristic teeth display. "Hey, space friends. Not sure if you remember us, but you visited Earth a few years back. Left kinda suddenly. Anyway, just wanted to let you know, no hard feelings. We get it. We're a lot to process." The camera panned to show hundreds of humans gathered, waving at the camera. "We've been working on some stuff since you left. Thought you might be interested. We've got music festivals, art exhibitions, scientific breakthroughs, some new memes. Oh, and we finally achieved sustainable fusion energy, so that's cool. Also, pizza has gotten even better, if you can believe it." Chad leaned closer to the camera, his expression softer now. "Look, we know you left because we're different. Maybe a little overwhelming, but that's okay. Everyone needs time to process. We're not going anywhere. Well, actually, we're starting a Mars colony next year, so technically we are going somewhere, but you know what I mean. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, you're welcome back. No judgment, no expectations. Just welcome. Because that's what we do here. We welcome, even if it doesn't make tactical sense. Especially then." Sarah appeared next to him, the groundmother visible in the background, still smiling. "Oh, and the little girl who gave you the drawing? She's in middle school now, doing great, still drawing, and she wanted me to tell you, friends don't give up on friends, even friends who live light years away and left without saying goodbye." The transmission ended with an image, Earth from space, with text overlay reading, "Earth, we're weird, we're welcoming, and we're waiting. Come back anytime. Seriously, we miss you." In the Zyntharian Command Center, Vex'thor watched the transmission 3 times. Then, he did something that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. He laughed. It was awkward, unpracticed, barely recognizable as laughter, but it was genuine. "Sir," Krell asked nervously. "Set a course for Earth," Vex'thor ordered. "Sir." "Not an invasion, a visit. We'll bring gifts, cultural exchange, diplomatic relations, and I need to apologize to a middle schooler for leaving without saying goodbye." "Commander, the Council will never approve." "The Council doesn't understand what we found on Earth, but maybe it's time they learned. Maybe it's time we all learned." Vex'thor stood, his stalks high with determination. "Besides, I've spent 3 years wondering what pizza tastes like. That's not a tactical concern. That's not a strategic priority. That's just curiosity, wonder, the desire to experience something for no reason except that it might be enjoyable." He turned to his crew, and his voice modulator captured something it never had before: warmth. "I think the humans would call that being alive, and after 3 years of efficient and logical existence, I find myself wanting to try it. So yes, set course for Earth, but this time we're not going as conquerors. We're going as the one thing humans believed we could be before we believed it ourselves. We're going as friends." And somewhere in the cosmos, in the space between cold efficiency and chaotic joy,
between conquest and connection, between what was logical and what was right. The Zyntharian Empire took its first stumbling steps toward something they dismissed as primitive weakness: humanity. Not the species, the quality. And the universe would never be the same. The end. The actual end. Or maybe just the beginning.